Listen, I can't be more delighted than to introduce our next guest, Esther Krakue, Conservative commentator. Hasn't been on the show for a long time, but welcome back, Esther. Very nice to see you. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you too.
Really nice to see you.
I love the Rachel Reeves impression.
I mean, just how you do it. Just stick your teeth together. It just sounds like. An equalities watchdog says basically organisations may have to provide neutral third spaces. I've never seen a country lose its whatever we can't say at this time in the morning over something so obvious. I mean, you must have been, like many women, delighted that the Supreme Court finally said, you know, a woman's a woman, she was born a woman, that's it, the end. But of course, that's not the end, because all of these ridiculous groups are saying, oh, but, you know, what are we going to do to get around it?
Yes, it's so difficult to be able to ascertain whether a woman is a woman by her clear lack of a penis. Look, I'm actually more bemused than anything. Of course, I am happy that this didn't go down the lunatic route of trying to say that anyone that identified as whatever gender they fancied was of that gender and should be treated as such. However, the law didn't actually make anything up. It just showed the cowardice over the last 15 years of people and organizations that have been bullied into manipulating the law into something that simply isn't. The Equality Act didn't somehow conjure up women that are actually men. It didn't make something that isn't. The ruling just said, this is the law, this has always been the law, and it is very clear. And actually, what people need to recognize is this is almost quite freeing for trans people, because what the Equality Act was saying is you don't need to have to pretend to be a woman or a man. Yeah. You are valid in your own right, in your own trans identity, and you cannot be discriminated against on that basis. And so it's just basically shown the cowardice of these organizations that said, actually, no, the Equality Act said something that actually it didn't say, and to suit me. And really, all the women that have been labeled TERFs and that have been abused by these organizations deserve big apologies. All of these organizations need to eat a big slice of humble pie. All these actors in Hollywood, those sheep-like lemmings from the cast of Harry Potter that decided to basically disown J.K. Rowling for her atrocious views that a woman doesn't have a penis. They all need to be lining up to give apologies, because it has been a horrible 15 years to the extent that it's almost unimaginable. And these organizations that are looking to the equality watchdog and saying, oh, we're finding it so difficult to balance these rights, the NHS being one of them. It's not difficult at all. It's actually not. It's as simple as they come. There is no difficulty here. If you need to create a third space, go right ahead. If sports organizations need to create a women's category and then an open category, go right ahead. Yeah. But it is as simple and as clear as day. And thankfully, this madness is going to be put to an end.
But the trouble is, it's been so deeply embedded over the years that some people can't actually get their heads around what to do now about it. Have a look at this. We spoke to a doctor yesterday, who we speak to quite a lot. He's a GP, right? It's a bit long, actually. I don't think we'll play it. But Dean Eggett, basically, we'll play it in a minute after we finish with you. But he kept referring to women as biological women. And I said, no, you don't have to call them that anymore. You just call them women. And he was like, yes, but of course it's going to be very difficult, because if somebody presents themselves to a hospital and they need to be put in a ward, and if they are trans, which ward do you put them in? Can you put them? I said, well, you can't put them in a women's ward anymore. And he said, but would you be comfortable putting them in a men's ward? You know, they're tying themselves up in knots, the NHS, about this stuff.
Well, this is the thing, and it's so frustrating that they somehow think, you know, sexes are segregated based on feeling. And this idea of presenting oneself is so baffling to me. I mean, no amount of makeup or witchcraft or tucking is going to make a man a woman. It is. I don't even understand this concept of presenting yourself. So if I present myself as, like, you know, someone who lives on the streets, does that mean I live on the streets? It's ridiculous.
Right. It really is. But again, you know, we've got the Labour Party tie themselves up with it as well, because they've got different various views on it. Keir Starmer, I think, markedly has said nothing about it. You know, this is a man who claims to be the king lawmaker of the country. You know, he kind of defines himself as the guy who frames the law. He works within a legal framework. He knows everything about the law. He practices the law. He was the big lawman when he ran the CPS, and he made the law then, and he prosecuted the law, and now he's got nothing to say about the law.
Yes, our dear learned friend, as he must be referred to in court, which is actually now as ironic as they come. Labour's reaction to this, or lack thereof, is probably going to be one of the biggest failures of this Labour government. And if you are running out of a list of things to vote against Labour for, to despise them for, this is certainly one of them. I mean, other than, you know, the tanking economy, the sky-high taxes, the complete lack of control of immigration, legal and illegal, their complete lack of inability to reform the asylum system, or in my opinion, scrap it altogether. Net zero, which is probably one of the biggest betrayals of the British public ever. But if you happen to be one of the 50% of the British population that happens to have a vagina and not a penis, and know that you are of one sex and not the other, or not some sort of magical shape-shifting creature to speak of, this is probably really up there, because it is completely ridiculous that the government of the day doesn't have anything to say about this landmark ruling, which really shouldn't have happened in the first place, because it affects all aspects of public life. It affects policing, it affects education, it affects, the healthcare, it affects shelters, for example, it affects sports. How can the government that is running this country, that is spending our taxpayer money, throwing it at failing policies like net zero, not have anything to say about something that affects 50% of the population? Right. They're going to realize that this is a PR disaster, because this is the same prime minister that also somehow thinks that 1% or less than 1% of women can have penises. Right. You really want to clear this up. The fact that he decided to hide behind Tony Blair's coattails and say, actually, Tony Blair, the former prime minister, cleared it up. The former prime minister, who has no responsibility to the British public, he cleared up what my cowardice was too scared to do. Yeah. And I don't think they're going to be able to live this down. I mean, what happens to their policy of trans students, for example? I mean, I know they can't access a gender recognition certificate until they're 18, but these do have implications. Teachers are wondering, what do I do exactly? Do I tell, parents that their children are socially transitioning? Are doctors allowed to mutilate young children now that the law is saying, actually, this is not going to change anything legally? What is going to happen? And this is when the government's response is supposed to be the most effective. But apparently, Keir Starmer is too busy on holiday and congratulating every other religion than the main religion of the United Kingdom. Yeah, it really is true. And when you see The Guardian writing about the fact that, there's a problem now because, trans women who are actually now legally men may have to be banned from going to rape crisis centres, you're kind of going, well, if you had to ask that question, you'd have to be a blithering idiot, wouldn't you? Well, and this is probably a perfect argument for them to have their own crisis centres. I think this whole debate around sort of the trans issue and how you're invalidating their experience or trying to say that they don't exist, I find it really extremely, and I hate this word, toxic. Yeah. Because what we should be doing is validating the rights of anyone. There's no such thing as trans rights or any sort of special rights that being a transgender person gives you. It's just human rights. Yeah. And they don't have to, first of all, they don't have to make the rest of us pretend to say things or do things that are clearly contrary to reality, but also they are perfectly valid within their own right. They don't have to go around trying to smuggle themselves into women's spaces to feel validated. They are valid in their own right. And hopefully this will spur on some more conversations around creating those third spaces or women in open spaces, if in the case of sports, for example. So we can just put this to rest and move on with our lives, because we've expended too much brain power on such nonsense. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Great to see you, Esther. Thank you very much indeed. Esther Krakue, Conservative commentator. Have a wonderful weekend. Have a great Easter.